Hello and welcome back to Rocketbud. On today's show, we are joined by Roei Samuel. Now, Roei is the founder and CEO of Connected. He's an angel investor, startup mentor, and an all-round awesome guy. I'm not going to give away too much, but he's really insightful and knows everything there is to know about angel investing. So sit back and enjoy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you'd mentioned that your mother was from Hungary and your father was a bus driver, and you know you've obviously come along on this entrepreneurial journey. So we're really interested to hear from you. When was your first ever business experience, and maybe a bit about your background, how you grew up, and kind of what led you to kind of pursue the entrepreneurial path, and some of the challenges that you've had along the way. And just if you'd like to tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, of course, absolutely, and thanks, guys, for telling me a bit about yourselves as well. And I really like the whole concept of that, three generations of entrepreneurs, and very, very cool. So, big fan of what you guys are doing. But do you want me to start from the top in terms of upbringing and how I got into initially into real sport, or just go top line and we can dive into things after?
I think it would be really good for our listeners to hear kind of, even as far back as your childhood, and like I said, your first experience with business. When did it happen? So I think,
Sure.
and maybe just, you can keep it relatively brief, high level, but just to give our listeners a flavor of kind of who you are, where you came from, did you have a privileged background or not? Just a little bit about your upbringing and where it led you today.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that, James. So essentially, I grew up in a very hard-working home. As you said just there, James, my mother grew up in communist Hungary. She escaped during the 70s to Glasgow, which at that time was not a great place to be either necessarily. And that's where she met my dad, who had been a long-distance lorry driver, been a bus driver. He's a really intelligent guy and very, very talented in many ways, but like myself, suffered with severe ADHD, which at that time, without any understanding of what that was or how to deal with that, meant he couldn't really hold down jobs, couldn't really work on things for a particularly long period of time. But he did eventually get into becoming a business owner. He worked his way up from being a taxi driver into actually sort of buying out a very small taxi firm and made his first bit of money that way before moving down to London. But when I was 7 or 8 years old, we lost everything. My dad had got turned over by a business partner. These sorts of things happen. But it's weird because when you're a child, you notice it in very strange ways. And that one year, maybe you go on holiday and there's big meals with family, and the next year it's all a bit, a bit sparse and a bit different. So you notice in that way. But as you grow up, you start to realize those things. And when I look at my dad sort of having to start again from absolute zero at the age of 48, and the next period of time being incredibly difficult, where we didn't really have a lot, I was always very cognizant of the fact that I would have to work incredibly hard for everything. My dad kept on plugging away, and when I finally turned 18, 19, when he was sort of 58, 59, everything really clicked and his businesses took off. And, so from a very young age, I had exposure to the ups and downs of what being an entrepreneur was, and the potential upsides, but the reality of the downsides as well. Speaking of the ADHD thing, it was something really important for me to deal with at an early age. I think I was going to go down that route as well. Went from sort of nearly being kicked out of school at the age of 15 to finally getting the diagnosis with ADHD at that time, and understanding a lot of patterns of thoughts and understanding how to deal with those things, and managing to recorrect and really be able to start working very, very hard, which was massively beneficial through to university, and then quite organically founding Real Sport when I was studying my master's down in London, which was a great learning experience and something which I look forward to going into a bit of depth with you guys as we go on.
Interesting. So you did pursue a degree and a master's degree. How do you think university impacted your journey? What's your relationship with, the traditional education system? Do you have any comments around that?
Yeah, I think it's It's very complex, and it doesn't make sense in terms of the traditional education system, because you can't assume that everyone learns in the same ways, that everyone benefits in the same ways. I never went to school, and I would do all my learning at home. So whether it was at university, whether it was during my A levels, I really rarely went to school, and had to do all the learning myself. But I found that was much more beneficial, and I was much more intent on sort of enjoying myself being younger and working very hard in short periods of time coming up to exams in the way that so many people do. But I found that actually that was the right way for me to work. So I think there needs to be some flexibility there, but it's a difficult one, isn't it?
Okay, that's really interesting. That's in of itself kind of an traditional education experience if you did it at home. But clearly you were a self-starter, and you knew what had to get done. So where do you think your drive comes from? Where does it come? Even from a young age, even being able to have the discipline to learn at home. Where does your drive come from, do you think? Or where did it come from?
It's a really good question. I think seeing a lot of people around you grow up in London and you see a lot of privileged people around you, right? And because of the way society is structured, you want those things. You are raised in a way, even by media or by society, to say these are the things you should be aspiring to, and most of them are based around consumerism. And if you don't have that growing up, you feel like, although in reality you're not, you feel like you're missing out. You really feel like you want those things. And I think not coming from a privileged background, but wanting to have the things that people around me had, although it sounds very materialistic, but I think when you're young and those feelings and that feeling of missing out really does become embedded, I think it does lead to a lot of drive. And I also think and I see this with a lot of people, a lot of entrepreneurs, people are scared of not fulfilling their potential. And I think that's a big thing for me. I really am, I would hate to waste or hate to not work as hard as I can to see where I can get to,
It's almost like a juxtaposition, because you've got some folks that don't realize their full potential. So they don't even know what they're capable of. And then the other folks, like you said, on the other side, that, it's like, how do they get to their full potential? It's like, I'm sure there's both camps. That's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Roy, I just wanted to pull something out that you mentioned in your early kind of story. You mentioned that your dad, I think it was the age of 48, kind of went back to nothing. I think that's a real kind of, demonstration of resilience. Would you say that your dad has been a kind of a real role model for you, and he's sort of a big part of where your drive came from?
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, if someone's your father, they're going to have so much of you in them, right? Or the other way around, you're going to have so much of them in you. And I think it's so important to understand where you came from. And even if you don't always see eye to eye, because not everyone does, it's really important to understand where you come from and understand the best parts of that, the hard parts of it. I also think, entrepreneurialism and being a successful entrepreneur can also make you a difficult person. It can make you a difficult person in other areas of your life. So I think there's lots of things to be taken from growing up with those role models, and there's good and bad in all of these things. But I think that determination to start again from nothing at the age of 48, whenever I've had setbacks in my life, that's the sort of thing that you want to channel. That's the sort of thing which you want to be able to say, this is doable. You can get to somewhere incredible, even when it feels like it's too late. I know it's crazy, and Harry, I'd love your view on this, but I think the pressures now on younger people to achieve are so much higher than ever. If you've not started your own business now by the age of 25, it's almost like you're falling behind. So to be able to draw on that experience of seeing someone at 48 have to, he was unemployable. He literally wasn't able to work for a year. Had to set up his own thing again. I think it's a great it's a great lesson to learn from.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And I think your point about sort of the pressures on people nowadays, Generation Z, all those different sort of age groups. But I think also we were speaking to Daniel last week, and it's that sort of instant gratification that you see all over social media and Instagram. And it's this sort of people are feeling the pressure because they see all these accounts saying, instant success, I'm doing this, I'm sitting on a Lamborghini. And actually it's not that simple. And you really do need that hard drive and that hard work, as you will know very well.
Yeah,
very well.
Exactly.
So I wanted to actually chat about real sports a little bit. So you mentioned the 18, 19. I think is that when you started?
So no, I think we founded it when I was 23. So I went through uni, had a great experience there, ended up being involved with a massive charity organization whilst I was there, which is great and something I'm really, really passionate about. And we were able to raise loads and loads of money for lots of different charities. We actually managed to set a world record for the most amount, the highest amount of money raised for charities by student-run charity organizations. So we actually managed to raise about 1.8 mil for charities in 2030, which is amazing, and I'm super passionate about that, which is great. And then that also really helped me start to formalize a lot more of that entrepreneurialism, because it was running an organization as a student. It was a lot of time management. During the third year of uni, it can be a really intense time even without the additional stuff. So that was brilliant, and really loved that, and super passionate about charity still. And then off the back of that, went to study my master's and founded Real Sport when I was there.
Amazing. So can you just give our audience a little bit of background on what Real Sport is? Sorry, and just what is is a platform? Just tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so it's essentially a content creation toolkit, helping people create podcasts and videos and other stuff, and then a community within that platform to share all the content with. And we applied that to the sports and esports market. And I'm a massive sports fan myself, and we had a bit of an inkling around esports being a good market to get into. And we had some really great growth on the sports side, and loved doing that, and got to do some great stuff within that sector. But after about a year, we could just see the esports side was picking up in the biggest way. So we shut down the traditional sports operations, focused purely on the esports side. So we were right, a bit of right time, right place. Very, very fortunate with that, because it was just when a lot of corporates were starting to pay attention to esports, and that, millennial demographic, because this was back in 2014, 15, when I think Gen Z was maybe just even like a fledgling term at the time. So it was still people talking about millennials then. And yeah, we were really fortunate and managed to grow a quite large user base. I think we ended up with just under 9.5 million monthly users, which was really, really exciting. Sort of UK, US, and Australia, which is great.
Yeah, that's incredible. Can you remember your first user?
No. Unfortunately, I don't actually. But do you know what's interesting? Talking about getting that first user, we were so intent on network selling, using our network, just in terms of our friends. So day one, I remember day one we got to like 53 users, because we got all of our friends to sign up on day one, as you would.
Yeah. Sorry. We all still here? Sorry, I think my internet went funny.
Yeah, still here.
Okay, so and then from then it just went from there, did it? From the 53 users to it just suddenly started growing exponentially by the sounds of things.
So we bootstrapped for a really long time. I mean, I didn't, as we said before, I didn't have a network at all. I didn't even know what raising investment was, let alone how to do it, or know anyone with the money to invest. And when you don't have a network of rich people who strategically align with what you're doing, it can be really tough. So we bootstrapped for a long time. I think we founded the business in January 2015, something like that. And we didn't raise any investment until April 16. So we were really, really bootstrapped for a long time, which was fantastic learning experience. But we managed to get to about 150,000 monthly users before we raised that investment. So that was over 15 months. And then, it was able to scale quite significantly after we raised our first funding.
Okay, interesting. So when did you, just in your younger years, when did you hit your first glass ceiling? Just talking about, was it challenging to raise the capital, or did it come quite easily? Because when we talked offline before the podcast, you were talking about, we just mentioned the underdogs, and you're not coming from a background of privilege, and how do you go about connecting with those investors? Because I think this is a good segue, because we'd love to learn about Connected and what you're doing there, because I think that's really disruptive, and and we help a lot of young entrepreneurs like Harry and even myself connect with investors that are outside our sphere of influence. Which just speaking from my own experience, I didn't grow up in a wealthy family, and I don't have very many rich friends. So obviously things change as you get older and your network expands. But can you comment about the glass ceiling or anything that kind of any like light bulb moment to kind of found Connected?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the way that we were actually able to raise our first bit of funding or get our first bit of money committed was actually through networks that I built whilst I was studying my master's at LSE. And it was primarily from international students. So that was a real crash course in understanding actually the power of network. And you hear all these people say network is your net worth and all these other horrendous sort of taglines that you hear banded around by the the LinkedIn influencers and whatnot. But genuinely, I think it was such a learning experience of seeing how much easier things can be when you do have a network. And it was one of the things that really made me passionate about founding Connected, which is the whole idea that especially when the UK has got these amazing tax benefits like SASEIS and EIS. But if you don't know anyone with the capital, it doesn't help. And if you don't know anyone with the capital who also strategically aligns with you, it's not necessarily the most ideal type of investment. So the idea of Connected, of being able to bring people together where you're connecting them on strategic value rather than gender, race, location bias, rather than the schools they went to, rather than all these things, has its challenges, of course, but hopefully can harness a lot of good faith that I see in people to really try and level the playing field a bit.
I think that's brilliant. And I actually think it's interesting that you've encountered that challenge during your phase with Real Sports. You struggled you bootstrap. And for our listeners, could you just quickly explain what bootstrapping is?
Yeah, sure. So bootstrapping is essentially doing as much as you can with very little funding and you funding your growth through revenue rather than external capital. So using early customers, using early adopters to fund whatever it is you're trying to do rather than go and raise investment from other sources, whether it be a bank, an angel investor, or a crowdfunding platform.
Awesome. Great definition. So you bootstrapped with Real Sport and then you started Connected, and it's all about, like you say, matching those entrepreneurs with the investors. And someone in my position, I'm really interested to learn more about this because I'm at that point in my journey where I'd like to do a raise. I've read about SASEIS, EIS, all that thing, and you've got your network. But for someone like me, where do I start with raising capital?
So I think research is a really important part of it. You need to understand the ideal types of people or have a framework for getting access to the right types of people. Because if you're trying to raise from angel investors, let's say, an angel investor could mean so many different things. You can find people who are only interested in biotech and you're trying to raise for a FinTech or whatever it might be. So much of it right now is guesswork. And it's one of the things we're trying to remove with Connected. So I think understanding who your audience is and understanding whether they're going to be interested in your proposition is the first part, because you're just going to waste so many hours reaching out to the wrong people. And it's difficult because it's not like going to raise money from a VC where you can go onto their website and see the things that they look at and see what their investment thesis is. It's individuals that you're approaching. So research or using a platform like Connected, which aims to give that information to you in a really consumable way is a big part of it. Because we actually did a study recently. We were surveying our own founder community, and founders are spending, especially at the early stage, up to 10 hours a week on investor outreach. And when you think about how many other things a founder needs to do, it's just far too much time.
Interesting. So research is a key part of that, again, through the whole process. But another point I would be interested is, at what point is an entrepreneur ready to get investment? So there's people before they've even started, they've got the idea, they've got the minimum viable product, or they've been going for a few years. At what point does it really depend on sort of the product you've got, the vision you've got, or what's the point of when you should go out and get investment?
That's a really good question. And I think it does completely depend on the type of proposition you have. If you're looking to build a med tech or a medical device, you're going to have to go and raise money to make anything happen. But if you've got a consumer-facing proposition or something which you can, a software proposition where you can either bring in a co-founder who has got the skill set or you've got the skill set yourself, then you can do a lot with a little. James is when you, I'm sure obviously his story with Flexi, but there's so much stuff that, in the same way that I saw with Real Sport, that you can really get done with a little. And I think that's the right way to do it, because once you understand the cogs in your business, once you understand where you can extract value and where you can get the biggest ROI, which you really, really have to knuckle down into when you're bootstrapping, then when you go and raise, your argument's so much more compelling, because then you can say to an investor, well, look, after the learnings of the last year, of the last 8 months, whatever it is, we can see that if you put some money into that, we can do this. So I think it's, once you've got something, it's a sort of business which isn't requiring a lot of capital up front to get anything into market, get anything off the ground, I think it's once you can start building a compelling investment story, because no one really likes an idea on a bit of paper.
I'd like to take this moment to introduce to you our sponsor, Flexi, the must-have app to track and manage your subscriptions in one place. So most of us have multiple subscriptions nowadays for things like streaming services, gym memberships and food deliveries. These are great and take the hassle out of buying everyday products that we consume regularly, but it can be hard to keep track of them. That's where Flexi comes in handy, using super secure technology to connect your accounts to see all your subscriptions in a single dashboard, putting you in control of your spending. And what's more, Flexi's subscription marketplace allows you to discover new products you may love, all easy to pause, resume or cancel in a swipe or two. So give Flexi a try. It's free to download from the App Store, or check out their website at www.flexyapp.uk. That's FLEXY app.uk. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, that's really okay. So you said a couple of things that kind of resonated with me. So I had a little light bulb moment about, I'd say 8-9 weeks ago. I chatted to a guy called Simon Severino, who's the CEO of Strategy Sprints, and he told me that I shouldn't be spending any time on basically raising capital. He said it's just fuel, and I came away from that call thinking it was right for him to say that, but then I started thinking more, and I was thinking, actually, there's people out there that they do this for a living. They raise capital for a living. Why am I? Okay, I've been reasonably successful. We've raised £100,000 for Flexi. I've the smart money conversation, as far as not all money's equal, and the right investment. I completely get that, and that's part of it's taken me longer, I guess, if I'm really honest with myself, longer to raise the capital than I probably care to admit. But it's just really finding the right fit. So then, so I think then our connection, Roei, I can't remember actually whether I reached out to you or you reached out to me, but either way, it just makes absolute sense. And 10 hours a week, that's me. I mean, I am the epitome of that entrepreneur that is spending probably way too much time, or has spent way too much time in the last 12, 18 months, actually, trying to find that perfect investor, and I've turned investors away that I haven't felt were right. And it's quite difficult when you really need the money, but you just have this intuition that it's not the right money. Could you comment a little bit about the difference between angel investors and VCs and the different motivations? Because I kind of understand it, but certainly for our younger listeners that are looking at all these different funding options, can you talk a little bit about that, and why it's important to the entrepreneur to kind of understand the different motivations and drivers for these different funding sources?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really interesting to hear that story there as well, James, and one which we've heard a lot. So it makes sense, and hopefully it's a bit of as you said, light bulb moment for you, which will allow you to focus on the really important stuff and keep on driving Flexi forward in the way that you have been. So that's great. In terms of VC and angel, so I think a lot of people hear VC and they think that that's where they want to go and approach off the bat. And everything that I've seen over the last year, especially, but from a few years before that as well, is VCs are just getting a bit later and later stage in when they're investing. A lot a lot of them who position themselves as early stage VCs, I mean, you know, you're not really ready to raise venture capital until you are into scaling mode already, you know, maybe even 50K MRR, something to that level. So I think if you are thinking of raising your first funding round and you're not quite there yet, in many ways put VC out your mind. Keep it in your mind in terms of the long-term strategy if you are looking to build a venture-backed business, but angel investors are going to be the first focused. One of the main drivers of that is VCs obviously aren't investing their own money. They're investing the money of their sort of partners and looking to build a great return profile for them over the period of the fund, and will invest based on making 10 investments where 9 of them probably won't do anything and 1 will do incredibly well. Whereas angel investors are, from what I've seen, a lot more driven to make the ones that they do invest in be winners. They are much more emotionally involved than a VC would be, because they're investing their own money. So it makes sense, you know, no surprises there. But for me, you know, what an angel investor should do is capital plus expertise, industry-specific knowledge, contact networks. Capital is at most, you know, 1/3 of what an angel investor, a good angel investor, should bring, in my opinion. Now, obviously, if someone puts themselves out as a silent angel investor, it's purely going to be about the capital. But I think it's more exciting to be working with angels who know your space, can help, want to get involved, and for me, that's a lot better. I think the other thing is angel investors may be okay with a business going for a 30 or 40 million pound exit, you know, because they're getting in at a stage where that's an amazing return. But for a VC, unless you're projecting your business to be able to do, you know, 100 million exit minimum, I don't think it's of interest to them. So I think if you are planning to do the venture-backed thing and you do want to go and raise VC funding, you do need to make sure you're playing in a market which is big enough. I see a lot of brilliant businesses which are a bit of a niche, which won't get venture backed because it's just purely not got a wide enough market.
That's really interesting. The emotional piece for the angels is really really key. And actually, I was thinking that, but you just said it. The drivers are different. They're not looking for 1,000x return like the VCs might, but they're obviously looking for a really healthy return. And those angels that can actually be willing to roll up their sleeves and really help this business succeed, or certainly go and shout about the business to their network. That's really helpful to the entrepreneur. And I agree, the capital is 1/3 of potentially what they can bring. In my experience at Flexi was to put together a really experienced advisory board and angel investment network. And I'm still on that journey. And I'd also say that just from be interesting to hear your thoughts, Roei, on this. But as far as you know what, I've just lost my train of thought. It actually was pretty good too. That's my ADHD kicking in.
Yeah,
oh, dear. I'll remember it in a second.
Right, I wanted to just quickly jump in with a question. Now, earlier on, you mentioned about the government scheme SASEIS and EIS. Now, could you tell us a bit more about that? What is it? How can someone like myself apply for that? And what are the real benefits behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a brilliant scheme. It is an amazing scheme. So EIS, I believe, was brought in the 80s, and then SASEIS was brought in 2012. So it's a bit more recent, but they're amazing schemes. And it's the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Enterprise Investment Scheme, SASEIS and EIS. And they're essentially a set of tax incentives for private investors in the UK. And it's designed for startups, where it will essentially allow the first £150,000 that they fundraise will have the SEIS tax benefit tied into them. And what that means to an investor is, if you invest £100,000 on SEIS, you can get £50,000 off of your next tax bill, essentially. And if, worst case scenario, and although no investor would ever hope this be the case, but if the business that you invest in doesn't work out, you also get a very high amount of loss relief. So the actual true exposure of an SEIS investment is minimal. And then with an EIS, which is up to 5 million fundings, your next 4.85 mil, as it were, is a 30% offset of tax with a 30% offset on loss relief as well. And with SEIS, the SEIS shares are also free from inheritance tax. So if you were to make an investment and pass away after 2 years, and those shares get inherited by a younger generation, those shares would be free of inheritance tax.
Wow, interesting, very interesting. And is it that those that invest, say for example, get approval for SEIS, who can invest? Is it family and friends? Is it a network? Is it businesses? Who can take part in that scheme and invest in, say, my company?
So it's pretty much anyone other than, and it's quite strange that this is the case, but pretty much anyone other than a vertical investment. So it can't be a parent who makes an investment in a child's company, which is strange considering that another SEIS investment would be free from inheritance tax. But in terms of the initial investment rather than the passing of shares, it can't be a vertical investment. But otherwise, friends, cousins, uncles, brothers, absolutely.
And they have to be accredited. They have to be making a certain amount of money or have a certain amount of liquid assets to invest on the SEIS. That's my understanding.
It's really interesting, James. It's really, really interesting. And I was actually having this conversation with someone the other day about structural inequalities that exist within the UK. And it's a real grey area. It's a real grey area around investing in startups because there are certain regulations and they're really important and you've got to make sure that you're standing by them. But there are certain regulations which say you can only invest in startups if you are a self-certified high net worth or sophisticated investor.
100 grand a year. Yeah, 100 grand a year or 250,000 in assets, isn't it? Without your house, in addition to your house.
In addition to your house, or you've been working in finance for 10 years.
Okay.
In which case you're probably going to have the first set of criteria as well. And for me, when you see startups being the biggest wealth creator that that it could be, if you made a small investment at the start of a unicorn, I mean that could be generational wealth you're creating.
Yeah.
It feels very unfair, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's real. I've never ever thought about that. I always thought that it was the fact that there was enough tax. They'd already paid the tax. So it basically costs the government nothing, basically, by giving a 50% return, offset on the SEIS. They've already paid the tax, so it's kind of a break even.
That is true from a purely economic perspective, but it's not positioned that way, is it? It's positioned about protecting retail investors. But when retail investors aren't protected from putting their pay packet in a fixed odd betting machine, it doesn't feel very fair, does it? No,
that's fine. And actually, some of the investors I've had to turn away they've been people that haven't been earning. So if my understanding is wrong, they always say trust but verify. If there's a way around that, then maybe I'll go back to these people and say you can invest.
It's a grey area, isn't it? It's a grey area. I know that. I know lots of people who have invested in startups who do not fit those criteria. I know lots of them, but it's shouldn't be done in truth.
Interesting. Oh, I remembered when I was on a roll and I totally forgot my train of thought. I was talking about when you have, I guess, angel investment, certainly in your critical phase of the business, you have a bit more, or whether it's perceived or otherwise, autonomy to kind of shape the business to the vision. Whereas if you have the wrong money in, and it might be from VC or other institutional funds, you might not have the same autonomy to navigate the critical startup phase. Once you're in scaling mode, it's all about what's the cost of customer acquisition, and you just need money to kind of fuel the growth. But when you're still trying to refine your MVP, it's nice to have investors behind you that believe in the vision and kind of let you get on with it, but help out where they're needed. So that was what I was talking about, this autonomy thing. Can you comment on that at all?
Sorry, James, it just dropped out out for me there.
Did it?
Do you mind just going? Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It might be me. Let me just.
No, it's because down in Kent, and I'm in a place called the Elan Valley at the moment, and it's like a micro it's like a microcosm, micro ecosystem. And when it rains in the valley here, it just the bandwidth is awful. So sorry about that.
No, sounds like you're in a lovely place there. Great place to go out for a walk. I was just saying, when I lost my train of thought earlier, the beauty of working with angel investors and folks that are, close to the business. They believe in the vision and the mission, and there's almost like there's a bit more autonomy for the founders to shape the business in its critical early stage, in line with the vision. And I'm just thinking, if you take the wrong money, then certainly if it's, if the motivations are not aligned, you might be in a position where you can't work with as much autonomy, and it might kill the business. And I have actually chatted to founders where they've taken VC money too early, and it's just basically ruined the business, because there's all this pressure about returns and less about actually what does the customer want and need, and use that data to kind of shape the product, but also be true to the vision. So in a perfect world, and I'm speaking from a CEO of Flexi, we haven't figured out all the answers, but we have the investors that we do have really support us, and we do have that autonomy. So we haven't taken any VC money, and part of it's strategic because we do want to grow a big business, but part of it is we're still navigating that MVP and making sure that we have the right market fit. Yeah.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I think you're spot on. The dream is bring on angel investors who will help you, not just give you the autonomy and freedom, but want to assist and want to help
make it better.
Which I think is great. And you're right. As soon as you take VC, you'll have expectations on growth. You can't afford to do a half year where you're retooling because you want to build something better. It's got to be very growth focused. If you're not hitting 10 to 20% month on month growth after being venture backed, you're essentially in the bad books. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and it's funny because I am entertaining some quite big checks at the moment, and I'm having to do psychometric tests and all these other things, and I'm just thinking, I'd like, I would much. There's some money out there that I would much prefer in some ways, because I'm just thinking, okay, I might score well on the psychometric test, but it's like, I can kind of anticipate what might be coming. It's like, but maybe it's normal. I don't know, but I'm actually doing psychometric tests for a fund right now. So
that's really interesting. I've not heard it before. I've not heard that one.
Yeah, I'm doing one today.
Amazing.
Yeah, so
I think that's quite fun, though, right?
Yeah, it is. I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. I think they're fascinating. You always learn through these experiences, don't you? I just wondered if you'd, so that's not normal then. That's not.
Personally, I haven't heard it before, but I think there could be. It depends if they are wanting to try and plug in advisors or something like that. Then I've heard that before, because they want to make sure that they can plug in the right people.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense.
I think, James, you've gotten to a really good point here, which is ultimately when you are raising capital, there's nothing off the table in terms of requests. The people writing the checks have got the right to ask whatever they want to ask. So I think that's another really good point.
Interesting. So I've got another question for you. So your experience as an entrepreneur and working with entrepreneurs, and also your mentor in Virgin startup, what traits do you look for in an entrepreneur? What do you think? I know that everyone's different and everyone has different strengths, but if there's anything for our listeners to understand, can you learn to be an entrepreneur? Are there any things you look for in a successful founder? Can you comment a little bit about that with your experience working with lots of entrepreneurs?
Yeah, of course. And although I've only started mentoring in the last year, it's been something I've loved doing, and I've now been doing it with Virgin, but also been fortunate enough to start doing it now with the LSE spin out, as well as London and Partners, and it's such a fulfilling thing. Like, I really do love it, and I think everyone's got something to offer, and I think anyone can get involved with mentoring. And if you're the sort of psychological type which enjoys giving back, it's a great thing to do. So I recommend anyone to start exploring opportunities there, because it really can be quite fulfilling. But in terms of entrepreneurs, I think that it might be a controversial one, but there is a lot of talk about burnout, and burnout is absolutely real. It's a thing. Most people have experienced it, but I think different people naturally have higher tolerances, and where that burnout point is hit will be different for different people. And there's, that's just reality. Everyone's different, right? What I've seen with the more successful entrepreneurs, and this is the unfair advantage, but it could be, potentially a biological one, is those who seem to have that higher threshold for stress, for workload, the ability to be hit with a million things to do and quite calmly understand how to structure, prioritize, and make sure nothing's slipping through the cracks. It is, it's unfair, right? Because people who just have that naturally lower tolerance to stress are obviously going to find it harder. That is what it is. But I think people who have got that natural higher tolerance and willingness to sort of make the sacrifice that goes with that, because if you've got the high tolerance to burn out, it means you will probably sacrifice a lot, in terms of relationships, friendships, missing out on other things, and it's got to be something you're willing to accept.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant way of putting it. And like you say, it's the sacrifices you will have to do if you really believe in your idea, if you really want to go on that journey. You actually mentioned about a mentor, and I had somebody the other day ask me, the question is, how do I find a mentor? So how do you find a mentor? For our audience that maybe have an idea but don't know how to start, how can they find themselves a mentor?
There's loads of great programs out there. Virgin, for example, is tied into government loans. So it's tied into a government £20,000 loan where they will loan, a small business owner or startup owner. They'll provide it to a small business owner, a startup owner, but they'll also bring in that mentoring package as well. So you can get it through those types of schemes. But also, a lot of people, if you reach out to them, most people are happy to help. I think we've seen that more now with COVID than before. People are really seemingly willing to give each other a bit more time, and most people like to give back, but maybe I'm being a bit utopian there. But I think, again, go do your research, go find out the people who are interested in the areas that you're operating in, and just ping them a message.
Yeah, and actually, just to add to that as well, I think for those folks that on the journey of finding a mentor, if you can't find a mentor straight away, then there's some wonderful books, nonfiction books out there. That's the next best thing if you can't, if you don't have a mentor immediately. And there's lots of great minds that aren't even alive today, so you can actually access so much information, whether it's online or actually get a book. And actually, earlier on, we talked about folks of putting themselves under a lot of pressure. Not having started a business by 25. Well, there's actually a really good book written by Napoleon Hill, which I think was written in the 20s, called Think and Grow Rich. Bit of a crass title, but he makes the point that, most successful entrepreneurs actually make it in their 40s. There's outliers in their 20s. Maybe that's not true for today, but that kind of it's given me a lot of, I read that when I was in my 30s, and I was thinking, okay, it's not too late, so I would encourage people to pick up that book by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. So, and I don't get any commissions from that. That's just not yet.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a really good point as well, and goes back to what I was saying with my dad. He didn't make it till the thing he started at 48 years old. So it is never too late.
Yes, brilliant. One subject, which is obviously a very current subject, is COVID. And I think from what I read, Connected started at the beginning of 2020, which was, I think March was when we went into our complete national lockdown. So how has that affected you? How have you had to adapt? And I guess out the other side of COVID, where's your vision and where do you want to take Connected?
Well, we've been really fortunate. I know it's bad to say, but when I started ideating Connected in maybe July 2019, couldn't have known that launching this platform in February 2020, where you're bringing people strategically together digitally, was going to be so well positioned for a pandemic. So we're really fortunate. I think it has in many ways accelerated growth, and we have been fortunate in sort of achieving over 20% month-on-month growth. And we just had the 50th fundraise happen through the platform recently, which is great. So we've been very fortunate in that way.
Brilliant. Well, that's good to hear. And how has investment habits changed since COVID, and where do you see it going moving forward?
I think it's been an amazing change. That one, location bias, which I think used to be such a big thing, seems to be minimizing a bit. So we've seen businesses in Northern Ireland, in the Southwest, in Sheffield, in Scotland, getting investment from London-based angel investors, where I think that would have been quite, where they've never met face to face as well, because one of the big issues is someone's going to have to get on a train down to London and get in with a busy schedule. And I think from a location bias perspective, the changes in investment in terms of people investing without meeting face to face has been incredible. Really, really is a game changer. And I think that just is going to save a lot of time. I think it's going to help with international flows of investment. When you're used to speaking to someone via Zoom, they may as well be in Scandinavia, they may as well be in the US. So I think it's going to be really, really positive for investment. We also just did a study with Connected, with our investment network, and I don't want to give you the wrong figure, and I will follow back up with you guys, but I think it was over 70% of our investors are intending to invest more in 2021 than they did in 2019. So because you've had some amazing businesses just grow so quickly and so virtually over this year, it's just shown people. I mean, you look at stories like Hopin, business founded in 2019, just raised a 400 mil Series C. Now when startups go quickly, I think you'll see them go quicker than ever, which is good for investor appetite as well.
Interesting. Very interesting. And I think the change with COVID and all like you say, you don't have to jump on a train to go visit. It's all been virtually now, and that's actually completely changed how we're going to be doing everything moving forward. You're not going spend an hour to a meeting, a couple of hours there, then an hour back. That's most of your day gone already. I think it's interesting, and moving forward, there's going to be some new habits.
It's a great mindset. Can you comment a bit about mindset? Because I think certainly in the COVID's tested all of us in different ways. I mean, I think I can relate to what you're talking about with COVID, with the impact on Flexi. I think there's some things we've done so much faster, accelerating, our retail onboarding and everything else. Everyone's going digital. So I think, we've got a taste of, it's actually been an amazing opportunity for us, and actually create a bit more efficiency in our work, in our work days. Before COVID, I was jumping on my motorbike at 5:15 in the morning, gunning down to Shoreditch, and then gunning back in the evening. And, I've now got, I miss going on my bike, but I've got an extra 3 hours to work, yeah.
Out of interest, Harry, you mentioned that obviously your business was impacted by COVID. How does that look now moving forward? And one of the things that I'm really interested by about businesses like yours is, did you try and pivot saying, how are we going to make this work in the meantime? Or is the thought, it's actually a great business, we've just got to wait for this to blow over?
To be honest, yeah. I mean, when the lockdown hit, the original business, which was very like events focused, as mentioned at the beginning, completely stopped. Everything was cancelled, and it was more of we need to. It was an idea that had been kind of playing around sort of in the head for a couple of years actually, and it was sort of, this is an opportunity just to give it a go. I mean, I had all the time back from all events and any speaking on any opportunities that were cancelled, and actually it's completely changed the way I'm now moving forward. The original company may start up again, but we've completely changed our direction, and the cocktail experience at home is going to be growing, and we've got huge plans now for moving forward for next year for the subscription model, which is where we want to get investors involved. And it's actually from a sort of a survival, a pivot point where we didn't really know how it was to be received, to now looking at getting investment and growing it. Sort of usually in this year and moving forward. So it's been a really interesting change and a very unexpected sort of past year, really.
Amazing. And will you go back to the events business? Will you bring that back, or is the focus now, we've loved the pivot, this is what we do?
To be honest, I think it's the latter. We've loved the pivot, and we've actually, the potential we can see with this movement. But also I think it's interesting that because of all the events stopping, that market to do the home kind of cocktail experience has grown more. There are other companies popping up doing this sort of home experience, which has started to sort of create a market for it. And we obviously love doing the events and the front facing thing, and we think that there'll be some opportunities to do some select events. We've got a couple of gym festivals booked, but I think for us it's going to be that home experience. It's that bringing that mixology to people at home, and that's the stuff that we've loved, and we're probably going to continue with that moving forward.
Yeah, you've had lots of success, Harry, haven't you, with actually contacting employers to kind of treat their staff to like surprise cocktail kits showing up. And you had a really busy month in December. I mean, Harry's done so well, on a shoestring and getting the business. And we're hoping to get Harry's product on Flexi soon.
Great.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, it's an interesting time. But Roei, just to jump back to this Connected, and unfortunately we are getting to the end of the hour, it's absolutely flown. But for someone, as mentioned, in this position, how do I get involved with Connected? How do our listeners get involved with Connected? And where can they find out more information? Yeah,
so we're on connected.co, and Connected is spelled CONNECTD. So no last E, so it's sufficiently techy. So it's connected.co, and we try and be as democratic as possible in terms of our pricing. So we did a piece in Forbes back end of last year, and we were described there as network by subscription. And this goes back to so much of what we were discussing right at the start of this show, which is getting access to those networks. We know they make a world of difference. How can you do them? So we've made it as democratic as possible, working out to about £20 a month for our startups to join. What we also do is everyone is sort of pre-vetted, pre-qualified on the investor side, which is, I think, really, really important, because you don't want founders having to waste their time. And we've seen other people make plays in this space where if you don't do that bit of quality assurance on all angles, then it can be a really negative experience for founders. And we're very, very founder centric. We really want to help the entrepreneurial wave, which is going to take 2021 by storm. We want to help as much as possible. So you can go straight to connected.co. You can go through that sort of verification process on the platform and get directly signed up.
Yeah. Brilliant. And actually, I have to say, I've experienced it. And I think it's really good value. It was painless. There's been great responsive customer service. There's some great investors on the platform, and all the other, my alternative options. People want thousands of pounds or whatever, and this is just like right on the money. I said yes immediately. It's like Roei said, it's like it's a no-brainer. It saves me time. So obviously we're early stage, but the experience so far and meeting some of Roei's team has been really positive. And this is even before. I mean, I think when we first spoke, it was clear we wanted to have you on Rocket Pod, Roei. But then I've actually experienced Connected platform, and it's really good. So I recommend it just from my personal experience at Flexi, and hopefully it will be your 51st business, Roei.
That's it. Absolutely.
That'd be awesome.
That's spot on.
So Peter, you've been conspicuous in your silence. You must have a question for Roei.
I got a question. My anxiety was building through the whole episode, waiting for the time. I feel like I need some kind of theme tune. A theme tune when it comes in. Maybe. I guess we're kind of wrapping up, but I kind of want to go back to when you mentioned about learning that you had ADHD, and kind of maybe what it was like before you knew that, and then after you kind of got the official stamp of approval in that kind of way. I just say that from my personal experience, and I know that it's not quite the same, but going through the schooling system and not really understanding school, and getting to university and finding out I had dyslexia, and being surrounded by, so I studied photography, and being on a photography course, and maybe 10, 15, 20 of my friends all kind of at the same time got this stamp of approval for dyslexia. And it just really was like, okay, now everything makes sense. And also, kind of to preface this, I went to a talk, maybe, I don't know when it was, in 2019, and there was a guy there called Mills who runs an agency called Us Two, and he was doing a talk, and the first thing was, he's like, I've got ADHD, this is going to be a bit all over the place. And his talk was maybe 20 slides, and he's going to 19, he's going back to 2, he's flicking all over the place. I was just so kind of fascinated by someone giving a lecture or a talk, and it's not in order, and it's not reading from the notes, it's just kind of putting it out there. So I guess my question after all of that is, how does that kind of manifest itself in your day-to-day now that you know that you have this thing, and how do you kind of manage it and just allow it to be in a certain way?
That's great, Peter, and thank you so much for sharing your own experience there as well. And I, from personal experience, well, it's such a light bulb moment, isn't it, where you just realize that, right, this adds up. Because I think it's so frustrating to know that you are capable of doing so many things, but it's just not happening for you in some areas, and you just don't understand why. And then once you get it, and I was so fortunate to get that stamp of approval, as you put it, at the age of 15, when I was, at the time where I was about to be kicked out of school, and for being disruptive and being naughty or whatever, because you just can't concentrate and you can't do those things. And once you realize that, okay, there are certain types of thinking associated with ADHD, and rather than trying to fit square pegs in round holes, and just understand that, right, you need to work with that, and you need to just empower that way of thinking to work for you. It is life-changing, right? It is life-changing, and a lot of it adds up. So I think, I encourage anyone, if you do think that you might have one of these, I know it's called a disorder, ADHD, but if you've got something like this, go and explore it, because it might be the most life-changing thing that happens to you, and all these things might start making sense as to why they weren't adding up before. So I completely agree with you, Peter, in terms of your experience there.
Nice. Yeah, this definitely, as you say, a light bulb moment when you discover these things, and the stigma kind of goes. Like, I remember if I'd had that test at school when I was 13, 14, I would have protected it. But then maybe it was at university, we did get a grant for a free laptop, so you're like, maybe there's a bit of encouragement there to kind of do the test to get that nice shiny new MacBook Pro. But
yeah, nice.
Awesome. Roy, we are sadly pretty much out of time, but two more things. One, can you leave our audience with one bit of advice?
Work harder.
Brilliant. Straight to the point. Awesome. And if people want to follow your journey, you personally, where can they go? Do you have LinkedIn, social media?
Yeah, get me on LinkedIn. And I love to speak to as many founders as possible. It genuinely makes my day. So feel free to reach out.
If you were to
awesome.
meet someone with a coffee, anyone, who would that be?
Do you know what? I would love to go for coffee with Gordon Ramsay. I know that's such a stupid answer in many ways, but I think obviously a very entertaining person, and I do love sort of comedy, and I do love that side of things. I think he's a really, really funny person, but he's also an amazing businessman. He's also an amazing businessman, incredible entrepreneur, built an absolute empire by the age of 28, 29. And I think although he's very good at making a caricature of himself, I actually think he's an incredibly savvy businessman.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Rocket Pod. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've learned a lot, and we've had fun. So and hopefully we can look back with you in a year or two, or whenever it feels right, and learn the next phase of Connected, and learn about all your successes and the wonderful people you've met along the way.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Rocket Pod. Don't forget, if you want to keep up with the episodes that we've got coming out, all the conversations and much, much more, the best thing to do is check out our social media and give us a follow. You can find us at We Are Rocket Pod on Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram. Or alternatively, check out our website at rocketpod.uk. Thank you as always to our sponsor Flexi. Now, where you want to manage all your subscriptions from a single dashboard, they are the perfect solution. There's subscriptions you can discover. They've got easy on and off functions, and it's a really exciting app that we absolutely love to use over here at RocketPod HQ. Thank you as always for listening. Have an amazing week, and we'll see you next time.